What is up, Slayer Legion? It is I, Taylor the Slayer. Today we're doing a WWE related reaction video like I promised. So this is 10 classic wrestlers who never held a championship in WWE. And this is by Cultaholic Wrestling, so if you want to watch the full video, the link will be in the description. And yeah, I'm curious who's on the list. So let's go full screen. Make sure I'm still recording. And play.
As a wrestling fan, there's nothing like the sheer thrill of seeing a title change hands. For generations, WWE fans have been able to remember where they were in life when certain individuals captured significant championships. Just about anybody who was anybody in WWE lore has won a championship, but not everybody. In fact, before rapid title changes became all the rage in the Attitude Era, there was a very good chance your favorite wrestlers may have never won a championship in the then WWF. Some of the biggest stars in the history of the business never wore any belts during their time in the biggest promotion around. I'm Sam Driver from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 classic WWE stars that never won WWE championships. Join us. Number 10, Bam Bam Bigelow. The beast from the...
That is insane, because he had main evented WrestleMania 11 and never held the title. I never thought about that, actually.
The East was truly a wrestler ahead of his time. Weighing in excess of 350 pounds and possessing the agility of a junior heavyweight...
How can a man do that? I just gotta point this out. How can a man move that way at that size?
Bigelow complemented his gallingly fleet feet with brute power and a menacing snarl. Wrestling's never been short on super heavyweight monsters, but Bigelow was among the very best. Across two WWE tenures in the 80s and 90s, Bigelow captivated audiences, but never struck gold. The first run lasted a little under a year in 1987 to 1998 and saw Banner cast as an ally of Hulk Hogan's. Though popular, Bigelow never really outgrew the sidekick rung on the ladder and moved on to other territories before long. By 1992, the WWF needed more monsters of the non-synthetic variety, and so Bigelow returned as an upper-card heel. This was a 3-year run, and it too came and went without any championships. Bigelow's only pay-per-view match for a belt was a tag title tournament final loss at the 1995 Royal Rumble. And that was merely a pretense to set up his WrestleMania 11 showdown with Lawrence Taylor. Number 9, Paul Orndorff.
That's insane that a celebrity like that main evented WrestleMania. That's insane. There was an era. Really interesting, in my opinion.
In the summer of 1986, Mr. Wonderful executed what many consider one of the greatest heel turns in WWE history. After weeks of letting his personal envy simmer, Orndorff double-crossed good buddy Hulk Hogan in a weekend tag team bout and immediately joined the Heenan family. Orndorff became Bobby Heenan's latest charge in trying to unseat the Hulkster for the WWF title, and their months-long program did insane house show business. Hogan vs. Orndorff was an extremely hot ticket throughout all of North America. But while Orndorff spent the better part of 6 months as the WWF star heel, he wasn't going to be dethroning Hulk. In the days of yore, it was more commonplace to have long-term babyface champions, and while Orndorff's program with Hogan spiked the numbers...
Now we've got the opposite, where it seems a lot of long-term champions like Gunther and Roman and some others probably were heels. That's just interesting to point out.
The numbers were already strong with Hulk ruling the roost. Hogan wasn't going to be losing the belt anytime soon. And as for Orndorff, a WWF regular between 1983 and 1988, he didn't really fit into the championship picture anywhere else and never did capture any sort of belt in the expanding New York territory. Number 8, the Junkyard Dog. When Vince
Yeah, I'm not trying to start a political tangent, but Vince is absolutely racist, so that's probably Junkyard Dog was not world champion or anything like that, even Intercontinental.
McMahon began plucking big names from all the remaining territories during his national expansion. Mid-South's JYD probably ranked high on his wish list. Junkyard Dog was in the S tier of most charismatic wrestlers in the entire business and was a huge draw throughout Bill Watts' territory. Kids loved him, grown-ups loved him, people of all walks couldn't get enough of the dog. That kind of wide-ranging popularity
Couldn't get enough of the
opens doors
dog.
in whatever your vocation might be. Junkyard remained immensely popular upon joining the WWF, but the golden accolades didn't come with his fame. Like many wrestlers of his time, Dog was a little hamstrung by circumstances. There were 2 men's singles belts and 1 tag. Hogan wasn't gonna lose the world, while the Intercontinental was predominantly held by heels like Hammer, Savage, and Honky during Dog's tenure, as a counter to the babyface on top. Additionally, the plethora of steady duos meant that the tag belts were just off the table. Dog did win the 1985 Wrestling Classic and figured into high-profile feuds befitting his popularity, but golden adornments nonetheless eluded the Junkyard Dog in the WWF. Number 7, Tatanka. While it's fair to say
I kind of forgot he existed,
was never
Tatanka.
truly a main event player in the WWF, he was still somebody the company heavily protected for the better part of 2 years. From his debut in early 1992 through to the autumn of 1993, Tatanka was never pinned or submitted in the WWF. And his unblemished record was as much a part of his identity.
I didn't know he had like an undefeated streak. I actually did not know that, because this is well before my time, obviously. I didn't know he had an undefeated streak, though. I never would have guessed that.
His legitimate Lumbee heritage. So protected was Tatanka that he earned pinfall wins over Intercontinental Champion Shawn Michaels in non-title situations. Even when the belt was on the line, Michaels retained via intentional DQ or count-out losses, preserving Tatanka's record. Though the WWF hammered home Tatanka's imperviousness to being defeated, that was nonetheless as close as Tatanka came to actually winning a championship. Subsequently, any real momentum he had was stunted after suffering his first loss that autumn to Ludwig Borger. Tatanka was strictly mid-card from that point on, his only real notable feud coming against Lex Luger in 1994 after Tatanka turned heel at that year's SummerSlam. Number 6, Dusty Rhodes.
This is probably the biggest one on the list, probably, if I had to guess. Dusty Rhodes never held official... That was why Cody came back, in all honesty. It was because his father never won anything with the world title in WWE. That's why Cody came back, in my opinion.
Though it's true that the American Dream was 43 years old when he joined the WWF in 1989, earlier visits in the 1970s aside, he was still Dusty Rhodes, one of the most recognizable and popular stars in the history of North American wrestling. What Rhodes did well in his prime, he was still mostly capable of at this stage in his career. And the crowd responses? Fans in the Northeast went as wild for Dusty as those in Atlanta, Florida, and the Carolinas did. Still, it was obvious from day one that Dusty wasn't going to be winning the WWF title, or even serving as a transitional IC champ. The polka dots and the messy blue collar vignettes were designed to cast the Dream as more novelty than headliner. Rhodes was never treated as an outright goof in the WWF, but there was a very clear ceiling placed over his bleach blonde mane. The WWF was happy to present Dusty to an audience.
It's a real shame they didn't give him a good push from my heard. He was really good from what I've been told. One of those guys that, like, it was just I think Vince just had something against the Rhodes family, in all honesty.
It's more than receptive to him, but scuffling in a few high-profile feuds was about as far as he'd ever get. Number 5, Superfly Jimmy Snuka.
Oh, God.
Today, Snuka's notorious for reasons that have become more widely known, so this entry is not a torch song lamenting missed opportunities. Instead, this is an honest acknowledgement of Snuka's one-time popularity and the WWF's choice not to reward him with a championship, even before May 1983. Snuka worked with title holders like world champion Bob Backlund and IC titleist Don Morocco, but never unseated either man. Honestly, Snuka fell into the realm of guys like JYD, and for a while Andre the Giant, and even Undertaker during most of the 90s, where they were so over that they didn't necessarily need a belt. You could book a world title match and whatever Snuka's grudge match was on the same card, and then have 2 highly anticipated matches that would sell loads of tickets.
I never really understood that Snuka was that popular. I actually never would have guessed that he was that huge back then. He didn't need the belt.
In those days, you could have justified putting a belt on Snuka, though it would have been harder to do so upon his WWF return in the late 80s, when he was a shell of his old self, and all he had left was his not-yet-tarnished name. Number 4, Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
First ever Royal Rumble
Duggan
winner.
didn't leave the WWF empty-handed. He held the unofficial crown in 1989, an honorific that was passed from Harley Race to Haku to Duggan to Randy Savage over a period of several years. Akin to the $1 Million title, the crown was a superficial token meant to enhance a character instead of being a routinely defended championship. Duggan may have been king in the WWF, but he was never champ. That's in spite of the fact that Duggan was pretty damn over for much of his 6+ years as a featured babyface star. Duggan feuded with the likes of Andre, Savage, Yokozuna, Race, and Sergeant Slaughter, just to name a few, but was rarely ever part of the championship picture. The most high-profile title matches old Hacksaw took part in didn't come until 1993, mere months before he left the organization, facing Shawn Michaels in a pair of TV bouts for the IC title. Like others on this list, Duggan was more of an upper-card gatekeeper boosted by perpetual fan support and didn't really need a belt. Number 3, Vader.
Ooh, this is another.
Now, this one's pretty.
This is another huge one that was really should have been champion in my opinion. This guy was insanely popular in Japan. One of the most real effective, monster heels we've ever seen.
Defensible. In early 1996, the WWF signed the monstrous Leon White at a time when they were seriously lacking credible heels to oppose the Shawns and Bretts and Takers of the world. Vader brought with him an extensive championship
what happened with
having
I?
worked at the top of every promotion he entered, including WCW. Putting Vader in the main event picture and crowning him champion seemed like an absolute no-brainer. Of course, it wasn't quite that simple. Vader was meant to have had a brief run with the belt beginning in late 1996, but then he ran afoul of then-champion Michaels, offending him with, among other things, his stiffer working style. A change in...
Yeah, Shawn messed up a lot of people's careers back then. He was a real dickhead back then. I wonder what it would have been like if he had actually gone clean sooner. That would be interesting to think about.
Booking led to Sid, not Vader, getting a cup of coffee with the old Winged Eagle instead. For the 2 years that followed, Vader slowly sank down the depth chart, never capturing a single WWF belt. And he was jobbed out to mid-carders like Bradshaw, Edge, and Mark Henry over his final months. Vader then left for All Japan, which had the good sense to fit the big man with the gold before long. Number 2, Lex Luger. Luger's case is such a bizarre story that we once devoted an entire video to the subject. The WWE...
They really tried to make this man the next Hulk Hogan, and it just did not work. They thought he was the next all-American hero, and it just didn't work for him.
Tried to fill the Hogan-sized void in 1993 by repainting heel Lex as an America-loving patriot, and created an entire campaign designed to turn Luger into a household name. This campaign involved...
They tried way too hard. You can't manufacture that kind of popularity really easily.
The infamous Lex Express tour bus, which planned to make its final stop at the 1993 SummerSlam, where Luger would almost certainly win the WWF belt from Yokozuna. Except he didn't. Instead, Luger stupidly won via countout, and even stupider, celebrated beneath confetti and balloons. There were so many things wrong with that whole charade, but Luger pressed on. At the following year's WrestleMania, Lex failed once more at winning Yoko's belt. The WWF had decided to saddle up with Bret again, leaving the former total package twisting in the wind. The closest Luger came to a belt after that was when he and Davey Boy Smith lost to tag champs Owen Hart and Yokozuna at the second In Your House. 6 weeks later, Luger returned to WCW on the Maiden Nitro broadcast. Suddenly, failure to win any WWF belts seemed pretty trivial. And number 1, Jake the
Oh,
Snake
damn. This is probably actually the biggest one. But the thing is, knowing what we know now, it wouldn't have been a good decision to put the belt on Jake, in my opinion.
But for 6 years, between 1986 and 1992, Jake the Snake was one of the most important characters in all of the WWF. Just about every feud he engaged in was deeply compelling. Defending his wife's honor against Rick Rude, avenging a neck injury against Ted DiBiase, avenging blindness against Rick Martel, attacking Randy Savage with a cobra, Roberts had an innate way of captivating you through his masterful work. And that's what makes it all the more surprising that he never had a run with any belt in the company. You can cite the principle of he didn't need one because he was always over that we already mentioned for other entries, and there is truth to that. But it's also true that most of Roberts' programs were centered around personal animosity, and not so much championship glories. Maybe having Jake chase gold would rob WWF programming of those splendidly personal angles he was so damn good at? In any case, when naming the best classic WWF stars that never held gold in the...
I think this just comes down to Jake was too addicted to deal with this. Anyways, that's the end of the video. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you next time.